Chapter 5. The Darkest Hour. If anything had been needed to give the impetus to Jack McMurdo's popularity among his fellows, it would have been his arrest and acquittal. That a man on the very night of joining the lodge should have done something that brought him before the magistrate was a new record in the annals of the society. Already he had earned a reputation of a good boon companion, cheery reveler, and withal a man of high temper, who would have taken no insult even from the all-powered boss himself. But in addition to this, he impressed his comrades with the idea that among them all there was not one whose brain was so ready to devise a bloodthirsty scheme, or hand would be more capable of carrying it out. "He'll be the boy for the cleaning job," said the oldsters to each other, and waited their time until they could set him to his work. McGinty had instruments enough already, but he recognized that this was a supremely able one. It felt like a man holding a fierce bloodhound in leash. There were curs to do the smaller work, but some day he would let slip this creature upon its prey. A few members of the lodge, Ted Baldwin among them, resented the rapid rise of the stranger, and hated him for it. But they kept clear of him, for he was as ready to fight as to laugh. But if he gained favor with his fellows, there was another quarter, one which had become even more vital to him, in which he had lost it. Eddie Shafter's father would have nothing more to do with him, nor would he allow him to enter the house. Eddie herself was too deeply in love with him to give up altogether, and yet her own good sense warned her of what could come from a marriage with a man who was regarded as a criminal. One morning after the sleepless night, she determined to see him, possibly for the last time, and make one strong endeavor to draw him from the evil influences which were sucking him down. She went to his house, as he had often begged her to do, and made her way into the room which he used as a sitting room. He was seated at a table with his back turned, with a letter in front of him. A sudden spirit of girlish mischief came over her, and she was still only 19. He had not heard her when she pushed open the door. Now she tiptoed forward and laid her hand lightly upon his bended shoulder. She had expected to startle him. She certainly succeeded, but only in turn to be startled herself. With a tiger spring he turned on her, his right hand feeling for her throat. At the same instant, with the other hand he crumpled up the paper that lay before him. For a moment he stood glaring, then astonishment and joy took the place of the ferocity which had once convulsed his features. A ferocity which had sent her shrieking back in horror from something which had never been seen before that had intruded into her gentle life. "It's you," he cried, mopping his brow. "And to think that you should come to me, heart of my heart, and I should do nothing better than to want to strangle you. Come then, darling," and he held his arms out. "Let me make it up to you." But she had not recovered from that sudden glimpse of guilty fear which she had read in the man's face. All her woman's instincts told her that it was not the mere fright of a man who was startled. Guilt, that was it. Guilt and fear. "What's come over you, Jack?" she cried. "Why are you so scared of me? Oh, Jack, if your conscience was at ease, you would not look that way at me." "Sure, I was thinking of other things, and when you came in tripping so lightly on those fairy feet of yours." "Oh, no, it was more than that, Jack," with a sudden suspicion that seized her. "Let me see the letter that you were writing." Eddie, I couldn't do that." Her suspicions became certainties. "It's to another woman," she cried. "I know it. Why else would you hold it from me? Was it your wife that you were writing? How am I to know that you were not a married man? You, a stranger that nobody knows?" He was so... "I'm not married, Eddie. See, now I swear it. You're the only one woman on the earth for me. By the cross of Christ, I swear it." He was so white with passionate earnestness that she could not but believe him. "Well then," she cried, "why will you not show me the letter?" I'll tell you, Shula, he said. I'm under oath not to show it, and just as I wouldn't break my word to you, I would keep it for those that I hold my promise. It's the business of the lodge, and even if to you it's secret, and if I was scared to when a hand fell on me, you can understand when it might have been the hand of a detective. She felt that he was telling the truth. He gathered her into his arms and kissed away her fears and doubts. Sit here by me, then. It's a queer throne for such a queen, but that's the best your poor lover can find. He'll do better for you than some of these days, I'm thinking. Now, your mind is easy at once, is it not?
How can it ever be at ease, Jack, when I know that you are just a criminal among criminals? When I never know the day that I may hear that you are in the dock for murder. McMurder the Scourer. That was one of the boarders called you yesterday. It went through my heart like a knife.
Sure, hard words break no bones.
They are true.
Well, dear, it's not as bad as you think. We are poor men and that are trying in our own way to get our rights. Eddie threw her arms around her lover's neck.
Give it up, Jack. For my sake. For God's sake, give it up. It was to ask you that you came here today. Oh, Jack, see, if I beg of you on my bended knees, bending here before you, I implore you to give it up.
He raised her and soothed her with her head against his breast. Sure, my darling. You don't know what it is that you're asking. How could I give it up when it would break my oath and desert my comrades? If you could see how things stand with me, you could never ask it to be me. Besides, if I wanted to, how could I do it? You don't suppose that a lodge would let a man go free with all of its secrets?
I've thought of that, Jack. I've planned it all. Father has saved some money. He is weary of this place, where the fear of these people darkens our lives. He is ready to go. We would fly together to Philadelphia or New York, where we would be safe from them.
McMurdo laughed. The lodge has a long arm. Do you think it could not stretch from here to Philadelphia or New York?
Well, then, to the west, or to England, or to Sweden, whence Father came. Anywhere to get away from this valley of fear.
McMurdo thought of old Brother Morris. Sure, it is the second time I have heard the valley so named, he said. The shadow does indeed seem to lie heavy on some of you.
Darkens every moment of our lives. Do you suppose that Ted Baldwin has ever forgiven us? If it were not for that he fears you, what do you suppose that our chances would be? If you saw the look in those dark, hungry eyes of his when they fall over me.
My gosh, I'd teach him better manners if I caught him at it. But see here, little girl, I can't leave here. I can't. Take that from me once and for all. But if you leave me to find your own way, I will try to prepare a way of getting honorably out of it.
There is no honor in such a matter.
Well, it's just how you look at it. But if you'll give me 6 months, I'll work as fast as I can without leaving to be ashamed to look the others in the face. The girl laughed with joy.
6 months, she cried. Is it a promise?
Well, it may be 7 or 8, but within a year at the farthest, we will leave the valley behind us. It was the most Eddie could obtain, and yet it was something. There was a distant light to illuminate the gloom of the immediate future. She returned to her father's house more light-hearted than she had ever been since Jack McMurdo had come into her life. It might be thought that, as a member, all doings of society would be told to him, but as soon as he would soon discover that the organization was wider and more complex than a simple lodge. Even Boss McGinty was ignorant as many ways, for there was an official name to the high delegates living at Hobson's Hatch farther down the line, who had the power over several different lodges, which he wielded in a sudden and arbitrary way. Only once did McMurdo see him, a sly little gray-haired rat of a man with a slinking gait and a sidelong glance, which was charged with malice. Evan Potts was his name, and even the great boss of Vermissa felt towards him something of a repulsion and fear which the huge Dan may have felt for the puny but dangerous Robespierre. One day, Scanlon, who was McMurdo's fellow boarder, received a note from McGinty, enclosing one to Evans Potts, which informed him that he was sending over two good men, Lawler and Andrews, who had instructions to set the active neighborhood, though it was best for the cause that no particulars to their object should be given. Would the body master see to it that suitable arrangements be made for the lodgings and comforts till the time for action should arrive? McGinty added that it was impossible for any one to remain secret at the Union House, and that, therefore, he would be obliged to McMurdo and Scanlon to put these strangers up for a few days in their boarding house. The same evening 2 men arrived, each carrying a gripsack. Lawler was an elder man, shrewd, silent, and self-contained, clad only in a black frock coat, which, with his soft felt hat and ragged grizzled beard, gave him a general resemblance of an itinerant preacher. His companion, Andrews, was little more than a boy, frank-faced and cheerful, with the breezy manner of one who is out for a holiday, and means to enjoy every minute of it. Both of the men were total abstainers, and behaved in ways that exemplary members of society, with one single exception, that they were assassins who had often proved themselves to be the most capable instruments of the association of murder. Lawler had already carried out 14 commissions of the kind, and Andrews 3. They were, as McMurdo found, quite ready to converse about their deeds in the past, which they recounted with the half-bashful pride of men who had done good and unselfish service for the community. But they were reticent, however, as to the immediate job at hand. "They chose us because neither I nor the boy can here drink," Lawler explained. "They can count on us saying no more than we should. You must take it as a miss, but it's the orders of the county delegate that we obey." "Sure, we're all in it together," said Scanlon, McMurdo's mate, as the four sat together for supper. "That's true enough, and we'll talk till the cows come home of killing Charlie William or Simon Bird or any other job in the past. But till the work is done, we say nothing." "There are half a dozen about here that would say the word to," said McMurdo, with an oath. "I suppose it isn't Jack Knox of Iron Hill that you're after. I'd go some way to see him get his deserts." "No, it's not him. Or Herman Strauss. Nor him neither." "Well, if you won't tell us, we can't make you. I'll be glad to know." Lawler smiled and shook his head, but he was not to be drawn. In spite of the reticence of their guests, Scanlon and McMurdo were quite determined to be present at what they called the fun. When therefore, at an early hour one morning, McMurdo heard them creeping down the stairs, he awakened Scanlon, and the two hurried on their clothes. When they were dressed, they found that the others had stolen out, leaving the door open behind them. It was not yet dawn, and by the light of the lamps they could see the two men some distance down the street. They followed them warily, treading noiselessly in the deep snow. The boarding house was near the edge of the township, and soon they were at the crossroads which were beyond its boundary. Here 3 men were waiting, with whom Lawler and Andrews held a short, eager conversation. Then they all moved on together. There was clearly some notable job which needed numbers. At this point, there are several trails which lead to various mines. The strangers took that which led to Crow Hill, a huge business which is in strong hands, who had been able, thanks to their energetic and fearless New England manager, Josiah H. Dunn, to keep some order and discipline during the long reign of terror. Day was breaking now, and the line of workers was slowly making their way, singularly and in groups, along the blackened path. McMurdo and Scanlon strolled on with the others, keeping in sight of the men whom they followed. A thick mist lay over them, and from the heart of it came a sudden scream of a steam whistle. It was 10 minute signal before the cages descended. The day's labor began. When they reached the open space around the mine shafts, there were 100 miners waiting, stamping their feet and blowing on their fingers, for it was bitterly cold. The strangers stood in a little group under the shadow of the engine house. Scanlon and McMurdo climbed a heap of slag from which the whole scene lay before them. They saw the mine engineer, a great bearded Scotsman named Menzies, come out of the engine house and blow his whistle for the cages to be lowered. At the same instant, the tall, loose-framed young man, with a clean-shaven, earnest face, advanced eagerly towards the pit head. As he came forward, the eyes fell upon the group, under the engine house. The men had drawn down their hats and turned up their collars to screen their faces. For a moment, the presentiment of the death laid its cold hand upon the manager's heart. At the next, he had shaken it off and only saw his duty towards the trees of strangers. "Who are you?" he asked, as he advanced. "What are you doing floating here?" There was no answer, but the lad Andrew stepped forward and shot him in the stomach. 100 waiting miners stood as motionless and helpless as they were paralyzed. The manager clasped his two hands to the wound and doubled himself up. Then he staggered away, but another of the assassins fired, and down he went sideways, kicking and clawing among the heap of clinkers. Menzies, the Scotman, gave a roar of rage at the sight and rushed with an iron span at the murderers, but was met by 2 balls in the face, which dropped him dead at their very feet. There was a surge forward of some of the miners, and an inarticulate cry of pity and anger, but a couple of the strangers emptied their 6-shooters over the heads of the crowd. They were broke and scattered, and some of them rushed wildly back to their homes in Vermissa. When a few of the bravest had rallied, there was a return to the mine. The murderous gang had vanished in the mists of the morning without a single witness being able to swear to the identity of the men who were in front of 100 spectators who had wrought this double crime. Scanlon and McMurdo made their way back. Scanlon somewhat subdued, for it was the first murder job that he had seen with his own eyes, and it appeared less funny than was led to believe. The horrible screams of the dead manager's wife pursued them as they hurried to town. McMurdo was absorbed and silent, but he showed no sympathy for the weakening of his companion. "Sure, it is like a war," he repeated. "But what is it but a war between us and them? We head back where we best can." There was a high revel in the lodge room at the Union House that night, not only for the killing of the manager and the engineer of the Crow Hill mine, which would bring the organization into the line with the other blackmailed and terror-stricken companies of the district, but also over a distant triumph which had been wrought by the hands of the lodge itself. It would appear that when the county delegate had sent over 5 good men to strike a blow at Vermissa, he had demanded that, in return, 3 Vermissa men should be secretly selected and sent across the hill to Williams Hales, of Stake Royal, one of the best known and most popular mine owners of the Gilmerton district, a man who was believed to not have an enemy in the world, for he was in all ways a pattern employer. He had insisted, however, upon efficiency in the work, and had therefore paid off certain drunken and idle employees who were members of an all-powerful society. Coffin notices hung outside his door had not been weakened his resolution to do in a free civil society. He found himself condemned to death. The execution had now been duly carried out. Ted Baldwin, who sprawled in a seat of honor beside the bodymaster, had been the chief of the party. His flushed face, gazed, bloodshot eyes, told of sleeplessness and drink. He and his 2 comrades had spent the night before among the mountains. They were unkempt and weather-stained, but no heroes returning from a forlorn hope could have been a warmer welcome from their comrades. The story was told and retold amid cries of delight and shouts of laughter. They had waited for their man as he drove home at nightfall, taking their station on the top of a steep hill, where his horse must be at a walk. He was so furred to keep out of the cold that he would not lay his hand on his pistol. They had pulled him out and shot him again and again. None of them knew the man, but there was an eternal drama in killing, and they had shown the scourers of Gilmerton that the Vermissa men were to be relied upon. There had been once conscience, for the man and his wife had driven up while they were still emptying the revolvers into the silent body. It had been suggested that they should shoot them both, but they were harmless folk who had not connected with the mines, so they were sternly bidden to drive off and keep silent, lest the worst thing befall them. And so the blood-mottled figure had been left as a warning to all such hard-hearted employers, and the noble avengers had hurried off into the mountains, where unbroken nature comes down to the very edge of the furnaces and the slag heaps. It had been a great day for the Scourers. The shadow had fallen even darker over the valley. But as the wise general chooses the moment of victory in which to redouble his efforts, so that his foes may have no time to steady themselves after disaster, so Boss McGinty, looking out upon the scene of his operations with brooding and malicious eyes, had devised a new attack upon these who opposed him. That very night, as a half-drunken company broke up, he touched McMurdo on the arm, and led him aside into the inner room where they had their first interview. "See here, my lad," he said. "I've got a job that's worthy of you at last. You'll have the doing of it in your own hands." "I'm proud to hear it," McMurdo answered. "Take 2 men with you, Manders and Riley. They have been warned for service. You will never be right in the district until Chester Wilcox has been settled. You'll have the thanks of every lodge in the coal fields if you can down him." "I'll do my best anyhow. Who is he, and where shall I find him?" McGinty took his eternal half-chewed, half-smoked cigar from the corner of his mouth and proceeded to draw a rough diagram on the page torn from his notebook. "He's chief foreman of Iron Dike Company. He's a hard citizen, an old color sergeant from the war, all scars and grizzle. We've had 2 tries at him, but had no luck. Jim Carnaway lost his life over it. Now it's for you to take it over. That's the house, all alone at the Iron Dike crossroad. Same as you see here on the map. Without another within earshot. It's no good by day. His arm shoots quick and straight. It's no questions asked. But by night, well, there he is with his wife and 3 children and hired help. You can't pick and choose. It's all or not. But if you could get a bag of blasting powder from the front door with a slow match to it. What's the man done?" "Didn't I tell you he shot Jim Carnaway?" "Why did he shoot him?" "What in thunder has that to do with it? Carnaway was about at his house at night, and he shot him. That's enough for me and you. You've got to set the thing right." "There's these 2 women and children. They grew up too?" "They have to. Else how can we get them?" "It seems hard on them, for they've done nothing amiss." "What sort of talk is this? Do you stand back from it?" "Easy, Counselor, easy. What have I ever said or done that would make you think that I would be after standing back from an order from the bodymaster of my own lodge? If it's right or if it's wrong, it's for you to decide." "Then, of course I will do it." "When?" "Well, you had best give me a night or 2 that I may see the house and make my plans. Then—" "Very good," said McGinty, shaking him by the hand. "I'll leave it with you. It will be a great day when you bring us news. It's just the last stroke that will bring them all to their knees." McMurdo thought long and deeply over the commission which had just been so suddenly placed in his hands. The isolated house Chester Wilcox lived was about 5 miles off in the adjacent valley. That very night he started off alone to prepare his tent. It was daylight before he returned from his reconnaissance. Next day he interviewed his 2 subordinates, Manders and Riley, reckless youngsters who were elated as if they were on a deer hunt. 2 nights later, they met outside the town, all 3 armed, one of them carrying a sack stuffed with the powder which was used in the quarries. It was 2 in the morning before they came to the lonely house. The night was windy, one broken cloud swiftly dancing across the face of the 3/4 moon. They had been warned to be on their guard against bloodhounds as they moved forward cautiously with their pistols cocked in their hands. But there was no sound save for the howling of the wind, no movement but the swaying branches above them. McMurdo listened at the door of the lonely house, but all was still within. Then he leaned the powder bag against it, ripped a hole in it with his knife, and attached a fuse. When it was all alight, he and his two companions took to their heels, and were some distance off, safe and snug in the sheltered ditch before the shattering roar of the explosion. The low, deep rumble of the collapsing building told them that their work was done. No cleaner job had ever been carried out, blood-stuffed annals of society. But alas, that work was so well organized and so boldly conceived that an annal should have gone for nothing. Warned by the fate of the various victims, and knowing that he was down for destruction, Chester Wilcox had moved himself and his family only the day before to some safer and less known quarters, where a guard of policemen could watch over them. There was an empty house which had been torn down by the gunpowder, and the grim old color sergeant of the war was still teaching discipline to the miners of Iron Dyke. Leave him to me, said Morito. He's my man, and I'll get him sure, if I have to wait a year for him. A vote of thanks and confidence was passed in full lodge, and for a time the matter ended. When weeks later it was reported that the papers at Wilcox had been shot from an ambuscade, it was an open secret that McMurdo was still at work upon his unfinished job. Such were the methods of the Society of Freemen, and such were the deeds of the Scourers by which they spread their rule of fear over the great and rich district, which was for so long a period haunted by their terrible presence. Why should these pages be stained by further crimes? Have I not said enough to show these men and their methods? These deeds are written in history, and there are records wherein one may read the details of them. There one may learn of the shooting of policemen Hunt and Evans because they had ventured to arrest two members of the society, a double outrage planned at the Fremissa Lodge, carried out in cold blood upon the two helpless and disarmed men. There also one may read of the shootings of Miss Larrabee while she was nursing her husband, who had been beaten almost to death by the orders of Boss McGinty. The killing of the older Jenkins, shortly followed by that of his brother, and the mutilation of James Murdoch, and the blowing up of the Stephouse family, and the murder of the Stendals, and all followed hard upon each other in the same terrible winter. Darkly the shadow of the Valley of Fear. The spring had come, and running brooks and blossoming trees. There was hope for all natures, bound so long from an iron grip. But nowhere was there hope for the men and the women who lived under the yoke of terror. Never had the cloud above them been so dark and hopeless as in the early summer of '75.